It was just past 9 a.m. when the glass doors of the Madison building swung open. The lobby gleamed like a jewelry box, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, golden elevators blinking politely, and the soft scent of fresh coffee and expensive perfume floating through the air. And then she entered. Esther's shoes scraped softly as she stepped onto the cold floor. They were worn, creased, and cracked at the sides, leather peeling at the toes. Her coat, though clean, was faded and patched. She carried a canvas bag held together by safety pins, and her grey hair was neatly combed back beneath a wear-upon hat, the kind no one wore anymore. She didn't belong here, at least. That's what the security guard at the front desk decided the moment he looked up. "Ma'am," he said, rising from his chair. "Can I help you?" Esther smiled gently. "Yes, dear. I'm looking for someone. I was told my friend Angela works on the 6th floor. I used to clean houses. I think she may have a job for me." The guard's nose twitched. He took a step back, subtly waving at the younger receptionist to approach. The receptionist was maybe 23, tall and sharp in a tight blazer, and heels that clacked louder than her words. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice already flat. "No, sweetheart," Esther said. "But she said I could stop by. I didn't mean to." "Then I'm afraid we can't." "Let you upstairs." Esther paused, her hands trembling slightly as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small scrap of paper. It was folded 3 times, the ink smudged from fingers too many times. On it, a name and a phone number. "I think this is still the number. Angela McBride. She was my client for years." The receptionist didn't even glance at the paper. She stepped back with a frown. "It smells like someone hasn't bathed in days," she muttered under her breath, but not quietly enough. The security guard chuckled. "Yeah, this isn't a shelter, lady. You can't just walk into any building downtown." Esther's eyes dropped. She had bathed. She had spent the night before at a city-run women's facility, where the water ran cold, but she'd cleaned herself best she could. She'd washed her coat in the sink and let it dry overnight by the vent. She wanted to explain, but the words dried up in her throat. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave," the guard said, more stern now. "This is private property." "But now," Esther turned slowly. Behind her, a few tenants had stopped to stare. 2 young men in suits whispered and snickered. One of them took out his phone and click-snapped a photo. She heard someone say, "Smells like the subway threw up in here." And then the laughter. It wasn't just rejection. It was humiliation. She held her breath as she stepped back through the doors. The wind outside colder than it had been a moment ago. Her legs shook. Her hands were numb. And something behind her eyes burned, though no tears came. She walked 2 blocks before she let herself sit on a bench in the park. Pigeons danced around her feet, and joggers passed without so much as a glance. The city didn't notice her. It hadn't for years. Esther had once been someone, not rich, not glamorous, but respected, needed. She had cleaned for families in the suburbs, washed their dishes, folded their laundry, listened to their stories when no one else would. She remembered Angela, sweet Angela, young, newly married back then. Esther had watched her grow, grieve, remarry, and rise in the corporate world. Esther had helped raise her children. But when her knees started to fail, when her back stopped cooperating and her vision blurred, the call slowed, then stopped. The world didn't pause when she couldn't work anymore. Rent kept rising. Groceries became luxuries. Her small apartment was sold. And now, here she was, sharing dorms with 20 other women who talked in their sleep and cried in their dreams. She thought of Angela's voice on the phone last week, hesitant but kind. "Esther, oh my God, it's you. I thought you'd moved away. Look, I'm working in the city now. If you're ever near the Madison building, stop by. Maybe I can help." Esther had held on to that like it was gold. But gold doesn't mean anything when no one lets you through the front door. Back in the Madison lobby, the young receptionist was still scrolling her phone. She had posted something on her story just moments after Esther left. "Smells like charity" walked in. The caption sat beneath a blurry snapshot of Esther's back. As she exited, the post got a few laughs, a few heart emojis, and one reply that just read, "Delete that now." The account that sent it was private. She rolled her eyes and ignored it. Meanwhile, someone else had seen the whole thing. From the second-floor glass conference room, a young man in a tailored suit and wire-framed glasses stood still, coffee forgotten in his hand. He'd watched her shuffle in. He'd seen the way she smiled softly, politely, just as he remembered. He saw the way she was ridiculed, ignored, dismissed. And his hands clenched so tight around the ceramic cup that it cracked. "Cancel my next meeting," he told his assistant. "Sir, cancel it. And get me our legal team on the line." Esther returned to the shelter that night. She didn't tell anyone what had happened, didn't cry, didn't yell. She just sat at the far table during dinner, quietly spooning soup into her mouth, her mind replaying every word from that lobby like broken glass. One woman across from her noticed her silence. "Rough day?" she asked gently. Esther looked up, forced a smile. "Just a misunderstanding," she whispered. The other woman reached into her coat and pulled out a small wrapped cookie. "It's oatmeal. My son brought it this morning. You should have it." Esther hesitated, then took it. With both hands, the cookie was soft, sweet, real. And for the first time that day, she felt seen. A week would pass, 7 days. That's all it would take to rewrite everything. To turn mockery into silence. To turn shame into power. Because next time Esther walked into the Madison building, she wouldn't be alone, and she wouldn't be walking out again, not unless it was as the owner. The office lights buzzed overhead, fluorescent and cold, as Ethan sat still in his corner office. The view outside showed the same city that had raised him, broken him, and rebuilt him again. He should have felt proud, the youngest CEO in the firm's history, running a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. Yet his mind wasn't on stocks or strategy. It was on her. Esther. The name clung to the air like dust in sunlight. He hadn't seen her in years, not since he was 17, scared, angry, lost. She'd been his shelter. Not just the roof over his head, but the anchor in the storm. Her hands had cleaned wounds that no hospital could reach. Her words had filled the holes left by every adult who'd walked out of his life. And this morning, he saw her again, in the lobby of his own building, being humiliated for smelling poor. Ethan had wanted to scream. He had wanted to storm downstairs and demand apologies, to fire every smug face behind the front desk. But he knew that outrage wasn't enough. What Esther deserved was permanence, respect written in ink. And so he made calls. He reached out to the legal department, to the acquisitions team, to the building management firm, quietly, carefully. No press, no announcements. The Madison building wasn't just a tower of glass and marble. It was a symbol of status, of hierarchy, and Ethan was going to flip that symbol upside down. That night, he sat in his apartment, staring at the same message he'd sent to Angela McBride 3 days ago. Hey, found her. The woman from the call. We need to move fast. Angela hadn't replied yet. He remembered Angela well. She'd been a tenant in the same complex Esther worked in. Back then, she was struggling with a toddler and a failing marriage, barely keeping things together. And Esther, of course, had become her backbone too. Esther didn't just clean floors. She cleaned hearts. She didn't just dust windows. She lit them from within. In a box beside Ethan's desk were dozens of notes. Crumpled old napkins with her handwriting, torn shopping lists with checkmarks. A faded Polaroid of a birthday cake she'd baked him from stale bread and stolen sprinkles. He picked up the Polaroid and stared. "I got you, baby," he whispered to the photo. Then he opened his laptop and drafted a memo. 3 days later, at a sleek conference table 15 floors above the street, Evan's team assembled. The room buzzed with small talk and coffee orders. None of them knew what was coming. "Good morning," Ethan said as he entered, eyes sharp. "Today, we're buying the Madison building." Someone choked on their latte. "Sir," one manager asked, "we already own 3 on this block. It's excessively." Ethan looked at him. "Did I stutter?" Silence. He turned to his assistant. "Have the paperwork ready by tomorrow, and make sure the current management company is replaced. I want full control by next week." "Yes, sir. And another thing," he added, "no one leaks this, not a word, because this wasn't about expanding. It wasn't about profit. It was about honor. Meanwhile, across the city, Esther stood in front of a mirror at the shelter. The woman staring back at her looked older than she felt. Wrinkles etched like wine-carved stone. Eyes sunken, but still soft. She held a scarf in her hands, the only colorful thing she owned. Blue with little yellow flowers. A gift from a child she'd once watched, long ago. She wrapped it around her neck and smiled. Tomorrow, she'd try again. Not at the Madison. Somewhere else. Maybe a small diner. Maybe the laundromat down on 5th. She still had her hands. She still had her kindness. And that had to count for something. That evening, a knock came to the shelter door. Esther was sweeping the corner of the dining room, her back aching, but her rhythm steady. She didn't notice the hush that fell across the room. She didn't see the director step forward or the quiet conversation that followed until someone tapped her shoulder. "Miss Esther?" She turned. The shelter director looked nervous, but behind him stood a young woman in a crisp black suit, a folder in hand, hair tied back in a neat bun. No makeup, no smile. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Ethan Langford," the woman said. Esther froze. "Ethan," she repeated. The name tasted like sunlight. "My employer wishes to meet with you. He's arranged transport and accommodation, all expenses covered, if you're willing." Esther blinked. "I don't understand. Why now?" The woman paused. "Because you raised him." That night, Esther didn't sleep. She sat by the window of the modest hotel room Ethan had booked for her, staring at the skyline she had long since stopped hoping to touch. A fresh set of clothes waited on the bed: simple slacks, a cardigan, comfortable flats. She ran her fingers over the fabric like it might vanish. She didn't understand what was happening. All she knew was this: someone had remembered her, and maybe, just maybe, that meant she still mattered. The next morning, at exactly 9 a.m., a black sedan pulled up outside the Madison building. Inside it sat Ethan. And beside him, Esther. The same front doors opened again. The same marble floors greeted them. But this time, no one laughed, because this time, the woman they'd called trash owned everything they were standing on. The sun filtered through the glass facade of the Madison building, spilling golden streaks across the marble floor. It was 9:07 a.m. The receptionist's nails tapped rhythmically against the polished granite counter, her eyes half glued to her phone, half scanning the stream of professionals flowing through the doors. She barely glanced up when the black car pulled into the front. Another exec, probably. Another big shot with too much ego and not enough manners. The doors hissed open. Heels clicked first. Then came the soft steps, slower, more deliberate. She looked up out of habit. And her breath hitched. It was her. The old woman. The one they'd laughed about last week. Only now, she wasn't alone. She was walking beside a tall man in a tailored navy suit. His expression unreadable, his steps precise like a ticking clock. His hand hovered just behind Esther's back, not touching, but protective, like an invisible shield. The receptionist's mouth parted. No. It couldn't be. She stood up. The security guard beside her recognized the woman, too. He straightened, adjusted his tie, cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, addressing Ethan. "Good morning." Ethan didn't respond. He kept walking. So did Esther. She didn't smile, didn't look left or right. Her hands were folded calmly. In front of her, her scarf blue with yellow flowers hung lightly around her neck, moving just a little with each step. No one said a word. Even the elevators seemed quieter than usual. On the 15th floor, the meeting room was already full. Senior partners, heads of departments, the building's management team, all seated, murmuring softly, glancing at their watches. Then the doors opened. Everyone stood. Ethan entered first. Then Esther. Some didn't recognize her. Some did. A few exchanged stiff, confused glances. Angela McBride was among them. She stood up slowly, eyes locked on the woman she hadn't seen in over a decade. Her lips parted, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. But Esther only nodded once. Calm, steady, like she was holding something the rest of them had forgotten how to carry. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table. He waited until the room fell completely silent. Then he spoke. Last week, he said, someone entered this building seeking help. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She was elderly, alone, dressed modestly. She didn't shout. She didn't steal. She asked politely to see someone she once worked for. His eyes moved slowly across the table. She was mocked. A few people shifted uncomfortably. She was laughed at, recorded, labeled, and thrown out. The receptionist downstairs was now sweating at her desk, her legs trembling beneath her skirt. Ethan continued. I was watching, not just because I happened to be here that day, but because I knew her. He turned toward Esther. She raised me. The room stilled. Dead silent. Angela gasped softly. Ethan placed both hands on the table, fingers interlaced. She found me in a foster system that didn't want me. She cooked for me when I had nothing. She read to me when no one else thought I was worth teaching. She gave me dignity when the world offered none. He stood up now. The Madison building is no longer under previous management. As of this morning, it is fully owned by my company. Murmurs erupted. He silenced them with a glance. And I'm placing its day-to-day operation in the hands of someone who understands what this building and this city have forgotten. He turned to Esther. You've always been more than enough. I'm just sorry it took the rest of the world this long to see it. Esther didn't speak. She couldn't. But the tears in her eyes said everything. Later that afternoon, emails flew like wildfire. The CEO's mother was thrown out by security. She owns the building now. Is she really starting a foundation for homeless women? One by one, the employees who had laughed were called into a. The receptionist deleted her post, but it was too late. A screenshot had already made its way around the internal Slack channels. Her badge was deactivated by the end of the day. Ethan and Esther walked through the building slowly. This time, the elevator doors stayed open as long as they needed. This time, no one looked away when Esther passed. Some nodded. A few apologized. One young man tried to offer her coffee. Esther simply smiled. Not out of pride, not out of revenge, but because for the first time in years she felt whole. They stopped at the rooftop. The city stretched wide around them. Cars like ants, lights, blinking in patterns only the sky could decode. Ethan leaned against the railing. I thought I'd lost you, he said quietly. I thought you had, too, Esther replied. He turned to her. I never meant to leave. I didn't want you to see me fail. She reached out and touched his hand. You could never fail me, Ethan. His eyes watered. He looked away. They were so cruel to you, he whispered. She nodded. Cruelty is cheap. He looked at her again. Then why are you still kind? Because kindness is mine, she said. They never took that from me. That evening, at the main entrance, a new sign was installed beside the doors. Langford House. in honor of Esther below it. Etched in gold, everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a door that opens across the city, in a shelter not far from the one Esther had called home. A group of women gathered around a flickering TV. The news was playing. A reporter stood outside the Madison building, talking about ownership changes, about social justice, about redemption. One of the women pointed at the screen. "Aye, that's Miss Esther." Another woman wiped her eyes. "She made it. She made it for us." Someone else whispered. Esther sat quietly that night in her new apartment, modest but warm, with windows that looked over the city like open arms. She poured 2 cups of tea, one for her, and one for the boy she had raised into a man. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to, because sometimes dignity isn't loud. Sometimes justice whispers. And sometimes all it takes to rewrite a story is remembering the people the world forgets. The days that followed were unlike anything the Madison building had ever seen. It started with a new memo, short, direct, effective immediately. The 3rd floor will be converted into a non-profit community center. Priority access for displaced women, former domestic workers, and elderly in need. Signed, E. Langford. People stared at their screens. Some scoffed, some celebrated, but most just blinked confused, then curious. Esther stood in the heart of the now vacated 3rd floor, staring at the echoing walls. Old cubicles had been cleared out. The carpet was gone. What remained was space, possibility, and a silence she could shape into something real. She ran her hand along the wall, as if reading. It's past. She didn't want luxury, not chandeliers or velvet curtains. She wanted warmth. A kitchenette where someone could make tea without being told to hurry. A bookshelf with more than dusty legal codes. Couches, safe ones. Light. The kind that felt like morning even in winter. She turned to Ethan. "Let's start here," she said. It didn't take long. Ethan hired contractors who worked fast, but not cheap. He insisted on good pay, fair hours, and materials that didn't rot after one storm. Esther handled the people. She went back to the shelter, not as a guest this time, but with an open hand. Some women didn't recognize her at first. She looked different. Cleaner coat, new shoes, a glint of purpose in her eyes. But when she spoke, they remembered. That voice, that patience, that warmth. One woman named Lena, mother of 3 who had escaped a violent home, took her hand and whispered, "Why are you back here?" Esther smiled. "To bring you forward." By the end of the week, the 3rd floor had a name. The Violet Room. Esther chose it herself. Because violets are quiet, she explained, but they grow in the harshest places. The Violet Room opened. With no press, no ribbon cutting, no speeches, just a door. And behind that door, safety. There was a retired nurse who offered to check vitals once a week. A former librarian who came in to read aloud every Friday. An accountant who volunteered to teach budgeting in the evenings. And a cooko, the cook Mrs. Who made soup so good. People wept at the smell, but not everyone was happy. Whispers rose in other parts of the building. "She's turning this place into a shelter. This isn't what Madison stands for." I don't want to share an elevator with those people. Ethan heard it all. He didn't flinch. He simply sent another memo. If you believe comfort belongs only to those with wealth, perhaps this is no longer the place for you. Office space is available elsewhere. One afternoon, as Esther wiped down a table in the violet room, a young woman entered. Tall, thin, red around the eyes. She stood near the door, unsure. Esther walked over. "Come in," she said gently. "No rush. I don't know where else to go." The girl whispered. "You found here," Esther replied. "That's enough for today." The girl broke, collapsed into her arms, sobbing like every wall she'd built had finally cracked. Esther held her. No questions, no judgment. Only the kind of quiet that says, "You matter now." Later that night, Ethan dropped by. He didn't wear his suit, just a sweater and jeans. Something about him looked younger in this space, softer. He watched as Esther sorted canned goods into a cabinet. "You don't have to do all this yourself," he said. She smiled. "I know." He leaned against the doorway. "You built this place," she turned to him. "You built the walls," she said. "I'm just filling them with something human." He nodded. Then hesitated. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we opened more violet rooms? Not just here. In every building we own. Just one floor. Just one door." Esther looked at him, stunned. "Are you sure?" He met her eyes. "You gave me a home when I was nothing. It's my turn to make sure no one else feels like that again." The receptionist who once mocked Esther now worked at a discount clothing store. She saw a news headline flash by on her phone one morning while folding sweaters. "Langford Foundation expands violet room program to 5 cities." A former housekeeper behind the movement. She stared, then shoved the phone back in her pocket. But not all the past had faded. One morning, Angela McBride stood outside the violet room door. Her hands shook as she knocked. Esther opened it. The two women stared at each other. Angela looked older now. Lines of guilt more than age. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Angela said quickly. "I should have helped you all those years, and I just let you vanish." Esther stepped aside. "I don't hold grudges, Angela," she said. "But I do remember." Angela lowered her eyes. "I want to volunteer," she said, "if you let me." Esther nodded. And just like that, healing began. Weeks passed. The violet room became more than a shelter. It became a movement. Letters poured in from women across the country. Stories of rejection, of silence, of being invisible. And one by one, Ethan and Esther turned those stories into spaces. In Boston, an old bank turned into a reading lounge. In Dallas, a corporate floor became a daycare for struggling mothers. In Detroit, a parking garage was transformed into a garden. Always named the same, the Violet Room. Always led by women who once needed one. One evening, as the city lit up behind them, Esther sat beside Ethan on the building's rooftop again. She sipped her tea slowly. "This still feels unreal," she said. Ethan smiled. "Feels like you." She looked at him. "You know, I still remember the first time you said thank you. You were 8. I had made you lentil soup. He laughed. I hated lentils. I know, she said. But you said thank you. Anyway, because no one else had ever made me soup. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Esther spoke. Do you think people can really change? Ethan looked out at the skyline, at the lights, at the city that once ignored them. I don't think people change, he said. I think they remember who they were supposed to be. That night, as the last elevator doors closed and the final lights in the violet room dimmed, Esther stood at the window. Below her, the city pulsed loud, bright, and messy. But she wasn't afraid of it anymore, because somewhere, down in that chaos, a girl who had been told she wasn't enough was sleeping safely. A woman who'd been cast aside was opening a new door. And an old woman once laughed at for smelling poor now held the keys. It started with a headline. Nothing explosive, nothing to bold, just a line. Buried halfway down a news site. CEO turns luxury office space into shelter floors. Investors wary. By noon, it had spread to 3 more outlets. By the next day, it was viral. Is Ethan Langford turning business into charity? The violet room floors, revolutionary or reckless. From homeless to power broker, the Esther effect, they called it many things. A trend, a social experiment, a PR stunt. The kindest called it radical compassion. The harshest, a waste of prime real estate. But behind the headlines was a growing unrest inside boardrooms. Behind shareholder doors, among people who had never missed a meal, never shared a room with strangers, never walked into a lobby and been told they didn't belong. At first, Ethan ignored it. He kept funding new violet rooms. He doubled donations. He visited each new space himself, shaking hands, listening, building quietly. But then, the call started. Ethan, this is costing us. We lost a major tenant in Dallas. The media is painting you as emotional. This isn't sustainable. One board member said bluntly, people don't invest in empathy. Ethan hung up mid-sentence. Esther noticed the shift. Ethan smiled less, spoke faster, checked his phone between sentences, and sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he stared out the window like the buildings were closing in on him. She sat with him one evening after a violet room meeting. Talk to me, she said. He shook his head. I'm fine. You're not, she said gently. You're shouldering too much alone. He ran his hand through his hair. They don't see it, he muttered. They think I'm wasting money, that I'm soft, that we're building shelters instead of success. She reached out, placed her hand on his, then reminded them what real success looks like. But the storm was brewing faster than anyone expected. A leaked memo, a disgruntled investor. Suddenly, the narrative shifted from skeptical curiosity to outright attack. Langford CEO faces pressure to step down the empire built on pity. Esther's rise sparks boardroom war. And then worst of all, a video. Old security footage. Grainy, distorted, but clear enough. It showed Esther being escorted out of the Madison building weeks ago. Her bag, her coat, the receptionist sneering. The caption read, "This is who's running the show now. Within hours, the comment sections were on fire. Some defended her, but many. Why are we giving buildings to beggars? She played the pity card. This is reverse discrimination. I work 80 hours a week and can't afford rent. Why should she? She probably faked the whole thing. Esther read every word. She wasn't supposed to. Ethan had tried to shield her. But you can't always hide the world from someone who's lived through its worst parts. She sat quietly on a bench outside the violet room that night, hands folded, face calm. But her chest ached like it hadn't in years. Angela sat beside her. "I'm sorry," Angela whispered. "I should have done more." Esther shook her head. "It's not your fault." Angela paused. "Do you regret it?" "All of this." Esther looked up at the building she'd once been thrown out of. "No," she said, "but I regret how easy it is for people to forget someone's humanity." Ethan called a press conference. He didn't want to, but the board insisted. The pressure was mounting. The narrative was slipping. He stood in front of a podium outside the first violet room. Dozens of reporters, cameras, flashes. He looked tired, but firm. "I won't apologize for building spaces that treat people like people," he said. "I won't apologize for turning profit into purpose. But," he added, "I also won't let misinformation destroy what we've built." Then he looked straight into the camera. "She didn't fake anything. She didn't ask for any of this. She gave me a life when I had none, and now I will fight to protect hers." Still, the backlash didn't stop. Sponsors pulled out. A major tenant cancelled leases. The board issued a vote. Remove Ethan as CEO. He sat alone in his office that night. The lights dimmed. Everything he built crumbling under the weight of other people's fear. He stared at a photo on his desk, him and Esther. The day they opened the first violet room. She was smiling. He looked free. The door opened softly. Esther entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one beside him. "I heard," she said. He nodded. "I might lose everything." She sat down, then let it go. He blinked. "What?" "Let them have the titles, the buildings, the walls. Let them chase their numbers." She leaned forward. "But never let them take your reason." He looked at her, defeated, confused. "I don't know what else I'm without this." She touched his chest, right above his heart. "This," she said. "You are this. You were this long before the suits, before the headlines." He swallowed hard. "What if it's not enough?" She smiled. "Then we build again, brick by brick, soul by soul." The board met 2 days later. Ethan didn't attend. Instead, he submitted a letter. It wasn't a resignation. It was a choice. "If protecting the violet room means stepping aside, I will. Because this was never about me. It was about remembering who we are when no one's watching." He signed it, closed his laptop. And walked out. Esther stood waiting outside. He didn't speak. She just opened her arms. He collapsed into them like a child. And for the first time in weeks, he breathed. But something strange happened after he left. The story changed. A video surfaced. Not a smear this time. It was of a woman, young, early 30s, speaking to her phone. My name is Lena. I was homeless for 4 years. Then I found the violet room. I learned to stand again, to write a resume, to look people in the eye. Now I work in finance. I have an apartment. I'm alive. Because of them. Because of Esther. Because someone cared. Then another. A nurse. A teacher. A veteran. The voices grew. A campaign began. Hashtags stand for Violatan soon. The same public that had doubted them began to rise. The videos kept coming. Stories from strangers. Confessions. Thank yous whispered into phone cameras. Clips filmed in back rooms, break rooms, borrowed kitchens. Each one a single thread in a growing tapestry that no one could unsee. I got my daughter back because of the violet room. They told me I didn't matter until someone opened a door. Esther didn't just give me food. She gave me my name again. The hashtag stand for violet flooded feeds. By the end of the week, it trended in 5 countries. Mainstream media could no longer ignore it. News anchors shifted tones from doubt to admiration. Think pieces popped up titled, "What if compassion is the future of business?" Esther Langford and the quiet revolution. The board panicked. What had started as an internal push to remove Ethan now looked like a public relations disaster. They called emergency meetings, spoke in hushed tones about narrative control, brand image, damage limitation. One even suggested offering Ethan a formal apology. Another said, "She's just an old cleaning lady. How did this happen?" And someone finally answered, "Because while we were building walls, she built people." Esther, meanwhile, stayed away from the noise. She returned to the violet room each morning, brewed tea, checked supply lists, sat with newcomers who couldn't make eye contact yet. She did not speak to the cameras lining the block. She gave no interviews. She only said, when asked, "If they want to hear something from me, they can come sit. I'll pour them some tea." Ethan stayed quiet, too. He'd gone off-grid, choosing silence over statements. He spent his days visiting the violet rooms, walking through the spaces he helped build, now thriving without him. He smiled more. He slept better. He remembered what it felt like to just be. And then, one morning, it happened. Esther was folding blankets when a woman burst into the room, breathless. "There's a line outside," she gasped. Esther blinked. "A line for what?" The woman dragged her to the window. Esther looked out and froze. Down the block, circling the building, stretching toward the next street, was a line of people, not waiting for food. Not protesting. But holding signs. Simple ones. "Handmade. Thank you, Esther. I was seen. More violet, less violence. People from every age, every walk of life. Hundreds of them. Silent, steady. Like an army made of empathy." That same afternoon, the board voted again. This time, unanimously, a motion was passed to reinstate Ethan Langford not just as CEO, but as chair of social development. A newly created role meant to expand the violet room model across all corporate holdings. They sent a letter. No apology. Just an offer. Ethan read it, then tore it in half. He smiled softly. He had already moved on. Later that week, a community summit was held in the Madison Building's grand atrium. The marble floors were still shining, but instead of men in ties and briefcases, the room was filled with people in cardigans, hijabs, aprons, baseball caps, people with pasts, people with hope. And at the front stood Esther. She had agreed to speak, but only once. No teleprompter, no notes. Just truth. She looked out over the crowd. Some faces she knew. Some she'd fed. Some she'd once swept around. I never asked to be remembered, she began. I just wanted to be treated like I existed. The room quieted for years. I thought my life was small, that I was only worth as much as I could clean, that once my body gave out, so did my value. She paused. But then someone remembered my name. Her voice trembled, but didn't falter. And now, here we are, not because of one building, not even because of me, but because people you decided that compassion was worth something again. Applause rose. Slow but certain. Tears followed. She finished. So if you're asking what's next, the answer is simple. Give the next person a door. Then sit beside them and pour the tea. Afterward, Angela approached her. Do you still want to run the violet rooms? Angela asked. Esther smiled. No, she said. I think they've outgrown me. Angela's face fell. But they need you. No, Esther repeated. They need each other. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. Give this to Lena, she said. Angela opened it. It was a deed transfer. The Madison Violet Room. Signed over to Lena's name. Angela blinked. You're giving it to her. She built herself inside those walls, Esther replied. She deserves to shape what comes next. Even met her at the rooftop that evening. Just like always. Same to cups of tea. Same city below. She's taking it over, Esther told him. He nodded. She'll do good. They sat quietly, watching the last orange streaks vanish behind the skyline. Then Esther spoke. You know what I realized? What? That I never needed the building. Ethan smiled. Me neither. She turned to him. We don't build power with concrete, she said. We build it by remembering who we lift. 3 weeks later, a new plaque was installed. Outside the building. It didn't have a title, just a quote. We are not here to impress. We are here to include Esther Langford. The building was quieter now. Not silent, but steadier. As if it had exhaled. Gone were the whispers of division, the undercurrents of judgment. In their place, there was rhythm, the sound of chairs moving for conversation, of teacups clinking softly, of laughter that didn't ask for permission. The Violet Room had become a heartbeat, steady, reliable, familiar. And every day, someone new stepped into that rhythm. The first was Mr. Howard, mid-60s, retired accountant, used to frown for a living. He'd passed the Violet Room door for weeks, always walking just a little faster, until one morning he stopped. He stood outside, clutching a worn manila folder. When the door opened and someone invited him in, he hesitated. I don't belong here, he muttered. The girl at the door smiled. Then you're exactly who we're waiting for. He stepped in a week later. He was teaching budgeting classes every Thursday. Then came Alina, a second-year law student who used to volunteer with food drives before burnout. And anxiety swallowed her sense of purpose. She wandered into the violet room one afternoon just looking for somewhere quiet to cry. She left with a mentor, a project, and a reason to keep showing up. The stories multiplied. A barber set up shop every Friday for free haircuts. A mechanic taught single moms how to change their own oil in the parking lot. A cafe owner donated muffins every Monday. No one asked for a resume. No one asked where you'd been. Only, what do you love? And are you willing to share it? Angela had stepped fully into the role Esther left her. She ran the violet room with the softness of someone who had once hardened herself too much, and now was remembering how to be gentle again. She made mistakes, double-booked classes, forgot orders, but she always listened, always said thank you, and most importantly, she always made room. One morning, she found Esther sitting on the couch by the window. A quiet moment, a book in her lap, a smile she hadn't seen in weeks. Angela sat beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Esther nodded. "I'm watching what we built grow taller than me." Angela looked out the window. "There's a rumor going around," she said, "that you're planning to leave." Esther chuckled. "It's not a rumor." Angela turned. "But why?" Esther folded the corner of her book, set it down gently. "Because staying too long is how seeds rot. And I'm not here to rot. I'm here to sow." Angela's eyes filled. "But we still need you." Esther reached out, squeezed her hand. "No, sweetheart, you needed me. Now you are me." Ethan found out the same day. He arrived with 2 coffees, like always. But when he entered the violet room and saw Esther packing a small box, her scarf, her old notebook, the faded photo of young Ethan beside a birthday cake, his hands trembled. "You're really going?" he asked. She looked up. "I've been going for a while, Ethan. I just waited until you could walk without me." He sat down slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," she said gently. "Just keep building. Just keep remembering." He nodded. But when he looked down, he realized something. There were tears on his hands, not of fear, but of gratitude. News spread quickly. The woman behind it all, the one who'd turned rejection into revolution, was stepping away. There were interview requests, articles, a letter from the mayor's office. She declined them all. Instead, she wrote a single sentence on the violet room bulletin board. "I am not leaving. I am making space." She didn't want a goodbye party, but people came anyway. Former guests, volunteers, construction workers, cleaners, executives, children. Dozens of people who once stood in line for soup, now standing in line to say thank you. No stage, no speeches, just a circle. And when Ethan asked if she wanted to say anything, she stood up, looked at the people round her, and said, "I was once told I smelled poor." A hush fell. But what they didn't realize is that kindness has a scent too, and it never washes off. She left at sunrise the next day. No grand exit. Just a small suitcase and a cab waiting by the curb. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Only left a note on Ethan's desk. You'll know when it's your turn to go, too. Until then, keep lighting doors. Weeks passed, then months. The Violet Room model expanded, not as a franchise, but as a philosophy. Other cities adopted it. Other buildings repurposed empty spaces. The name changed sometimes, the porch, the hearth, the circle. But the mission never did. Welcome in. Sit down. You matter. One fall afternoon, Ethan sat in his office when Angela knocked on the door. There's someone asking for you downstairs, she said. Says it's urgent. He nodded, stood up. When he got to the lobby, a woman stood waiting. Tall, quiet, maybe 40, worn clothes, tired eyes. She looked up. Are you Mr. Langford? Yes. She held out a folded piece of paper. Someone told me if I ever lost my way, to give you this. He opened it. Inside, written in soft, careful penmanship, the next Violet Room is ready. She's the key. Ethan looked up. The woman trembled. I don't have much, she said, but I'm ready to build. He smiled. Then come with me, he said, and held the door open. That night, as the city hummed with neon and footsteps, a candle burned on the windowsill of the Violet Room. No one knew who lit it. But everyone knew what it meant. Esther wasn't gone. She never could be. Because legacy isn't a statue. It's a table someone left behind, still warm from where they sat, waiting for the next person to take their place. The town was small, just a handful of streets, a diner with chipped booths, a post office that closed at 4, and a train station where no train had arrived on time in years. Esther liked it instantly. No one stared too long. No one whispered her name. Because no one knew it. Not here. And that was a gift. She rented a tiny cottage at the edge of town. Peeling paint, a creaky porch, a back garden filled with weeds. She called it perfect. Each morning, she swept the porch, fed the birds, and walked to the market for bread and oranges. Sometimes she brought a thermos of tea and sat on the bench near the old schoolhouse, watching children chase each other through dust and laughter. No headlines, no boardrooms, no questions. Just sky. And time. It had been for months since she'd left the Madison building. 5 since the Violet Room became something bigger than her. She didn't check the news anymore, didn't carry a phone, didn't write her name on anything. But once a week, she mailed a letter. Always the same format. No return address. Just his simple card. Hand-written. Sent to Ethan. The garden bloomed this week. Marigolds, I think, or something pretending to be. A woman at the market dropped her purse. I helped her pick it up. She said thank you like no one had in years. Isn't that funny? How a single thank you can feel like a poem. No need to write back, but do drink water. And remember, the tea should steep, not drown. Love, E. Ethan never wrote back, not because he didn't want to, but because the letters weren't questions. They were reminders, each one folded like a hug. He kept them in a drawer. Every card, every word. And on the quiet days between board meetings, site visits, Violet room lunches he would read one dot sometimes aloud. Just to hear her voice in the room again. One morning, Ethan stood before a map. His office had changed. No longer all glass and gloss. Now it felt like a workshop blueprints. On the wall, notes pinned with thumbtacks, photos from Violet rooms across the world. But today, he looked not at where they had built, but where they hadn't. He circled a city in the Midwest. Not large, not flashy, just overlooked. He picked up his phone. "Get me a flight," he told his assistant, "and a name of a place no one's talking about." That same afternoon, Esther stood in her garden. She had just finished pruning the stubborn rose bush by the fence when she heard footsteps on the gravel. A boy, maybe 12. Shoes too big, jacket too thin. She straightened, wiped her hands. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" she asked. The boy shuffled closer, pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. Esther took it, opened it, and smiled, because inside, written in Ethan's unmistakable scrawl, found a town. No shelters, no centers, no Violet room. Yet she looked up at the boy. "You hungry?" He nodded. "Come in then," she said. "I'll show you how to make tea." That evening, she packed a small bag, just a scarf, a notebook, and a photograph that still smelled faintly of candle wax and lentil soup. She left the porch light on, not because she was coming back, but because someone else might need it. And light should never go to waste. On the train the next morning, she sat by the window. The world rushed past fields, silos, gas stations, blinking lights. She held her cup of tea close, her fingers warm against the ceramic. A child giggled in the seat behind her. A conductor whistled. And somewhere far away, in a building she once cleaned, someone was saying her name with reverence, not as a legend, but as a beginning. Because some people change cities. Some change laws. But the rarest ones? They change what we believe is possible by living it quietly, over and over, one open door at a time. The town was called Fairfield. Population 7,042, a number that hadn't changed much in years. It had two grocery stores, one high school, and a park where ducks waddled across faded sidewalks like they owned the place. People left there, doors unlocked. Mail carriers knew every dog's name, and change didn't come often. So when a stranger stepped off the train one crisp Monday morning, people noticed, not because she made a scene, but because she didn't. A small suitcase, a canvas bag, a scarf the color of cornflowers, and a calmness that seemed older than time. Esther didn't ask where the town's shelters were. She already knew there weren't any. She didn't ask about community centers or food, pantries or women's clinics. She saw it in the empty building windows, in the tight smiles of the cashier who counted change too carefully, in the tired wave of a school janitor who limped slightly but never stopped. Fairfield wasn't broken, but it was hollow, waiting for something to fill the quiet. She rented a room above the bakery. The woman who ran it, Linda, didn't ask for an ID, just a handshake and a shared love of tea. "You stay as long as you want," Linda said. "God knows it's Been quiet around here for too long. Esther smiled. I won't be loud, just useful. Linda smiled back. Same thing in this town. That week, Esther walked every street, every alley. She greeted strangers like old friends, listened more than she spoke, and when someone asked, "What brings you here?" she simply said, "I came to remember something I forgot." Meanwhile, Ethan arrived 3 days later. No suit, no team, no headlines, just a duffel bag and a folded paper map. He found her on a park bench, feeding breadcrumbs to ducks with the focus of someone solving a mystery. "You took your time," she said without looking up. "I let you have the quiet first," he replied. She passed him the bag of crumbs. They didn't need a hug. Just silence and shared ducks. They stayed for 2 weeks before speaking to anyone in official capacity. No mayors. No landlords. No donors. Instead, they went to the school. Met the janitor, Mr. Ray, who worked 3 jobs and still showed up early. Then to the library where Miss Clara had been fighting to keep the heat running with bake sales, and donated quilts. Then to the diner where teenage servers took home leftover pancakes, wrapped in napkins for younger siblings. Each place told a story. Each story had the same ending. We're getting by, but just barely. Esther and Ethan found an old post office building that had been empty since the mail routes changed. It was nothing much. Dusty, cracked windows, roof that leaked in 3 corners. Perfect. They knocked on the city office's door the next morning. A man named George looked at them over wire-rimmed glasses. "You want to lease the old post office?" "Yes," Esther said. "For what?" "A violet room." George frowned. "A what?" Ethan stepped forward. "It's a place where people rest, rebuild, and remember they matter." George scratched his chin. "We already got a church." "This isn't a church," Esther replied softly. "But it might feel like one." Paperwork took a week. Renovation took 2 months. Word got out before they ever made a flyer. By the time the paint was dry, there was a line around the block, not of people needing help, but of people offering it. A plumber who refused payment. A farmer who dropped off crates of apples. A teenage artist who painted a mural on the outside wall. 2 hands cupped gently around a violet bloom. Opening day had no speech, just a chalkboard sign out front. "Come in, we're ready." And people did. A young mother who hadn't spoken to her parents in years. A teacher who hadn't taught since COVID. An old man who just wanted to play chess with someone who didn't cheat. Each found something inside. A chair, a story, a way back. And for Esther and Ethan, they found something to not legacy. Not praise, but a kind of stillness. The kind that only shows up when you've stopped chasing anything but meaning. One evening, after everyone had gone, Ethan found Esther alone in the kitchen. She was scrubbing a pot with the same care she once gave to broken boys and cold teacups. "You ever think we'll stop doing this?" he asked. She rinsed the pot, dried it, only when there's no one left to love. He nodded. "I thought you'd say that." They stepped outside. The mural shimmered under the streetlight. The hands. The violet and in small cursive beneath, planted. "Buy one, grown by many. That night, they sat on the steps and looked up at the stars. No city lights to drown them, no noise to rush them, just sky and time. And the kind of peace that doesn't come from being known, but from knowing you were useful, to someone, somewhere, even just once. It was raining gently the morning Esther left. Not the kind of rain that ruins plans. The kind that feels like the world is whispering. Go softly now. She packed light. She always did. Just the scarf, the notebook, a new photo Ethan standing in front of the latest Violet Room mural, smiling like he finally knew he didn't have to be strong all the time. She didn't leave a note. Not this time. Instead, she left something else, a small wooden box, set neatly on the table inside the Violet Room kitchen. Ethan found it an hour later. He paused when he saw it. He didn't open it right away. He just stared, like somehow she was still in the room, waiting for him to notice. Finally, he lifted the lid. Inside were three things: a folded letter, written in her careful, sloping handwriting, a packet of violet seeds, a small brass key. He read the letter slowly. Twice. Then sat down. Hard. Because it wasn't just a farewell. It was instruction, permission, and love written in every line. Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've gone before you again. I've always been a step ahead. It's a habit I learned from cleaning floors before Dom. But don't worry, this time you'll catch up. The key is to a building in the next town over. It's empty now, but it's yours. Yours to choose what to do with. Don't make it mine. Don't make it a shrine. Make it something new. Because that's the secret, Ethan. The Violet Room was never about the room. It was about the soil beneath it. And you, my dear boy, have always had the hands of a gardener. Keep planting. Keep loving. And if someday a girl with too much silence, or a boy who smells like sadness knocks on your door, let them in. I'll be in the kettle. He didn't cry right away. He just held the letter against his chest, felt the weight of it. The warmth. And then he exhaled. The kind of breath you only release when someone else has been holding it for you your whole life. That evening, he walked to the edge of the town. To a small lot with a crooked fence and a dusty for sale sign. The key fit. Of course it did. He opened the door. Empty. Quiet. Echoes waiting for shape. He didn't need blueprints, or investors, or a press release. He just needed a kettle. And time. The new Violet Room opened 6 months later. It didn't look like any of the others. There were plants along the window sills, a shelf of mismatched mugs, a bulletin board with photos of people laughing and crying, and growing. And a drawer in the back marked tea, letters, forgiveness. One morning, a young girl knocked. She couldn't have been more than 15. She wore a hoodie to big and a sadness to loud. Ethan opened the door. She didn't say a word. Just held out a paper. Shaking. Inside. One sentence. I don't know where else to go. Ethan stepped aside. Then you came to the right place. He made tea, sat with her, didn't ask questions, didn't offer answers. Just stayed. And when she finally spoke hours later, it wasn't a story. It was just a name. Her own, said out loud. For the first time in weeks, that night, Ethan wrote his first letter, not to anyone, just to keep the tradition alive. He placed it in the drawer, folded carefully, labeled to the next one, and in it, he wrote, "You don't have to fix the whole world. Just hold one corner of it steady." Far away, in another small town, an old woman sat by a window. Her tea steamed gently in her hands. Outside, a little girl skipped past on the sidewalk, humming to herself. Esther smiled and whispered, "Just to the wind." Another one found the light. Because in the end, the violet room was never a place. It was a promise that no one is too small to be remembered. No one too broken to be welcomed. And no act of kindness too quiet to echo forever.